My name is Kevin Galilei. I have been imprisoned 7 times, have spent nearly 1 year behind bars, have not seen my wife and children in more than 4 years, have not slept in my own bed for just as long, have lost every material possession I have ever had, have suffered 5 hunger strikes, the longest of which lasted 75 days, and have lived in exile for nearly 2 years in order to bring you the truth. What you are about to hear is forbidden fruit. Countless people and several heads of state have been murdered to keep these secrets secret, and countless more have had their lives destroyed. The greatest threat to public health is not the thoughtless abuse of alcohol and tobacco by careless individuals, but the deliberate use of endocrine disruptors by genocidal governments acting under the direction of the United Nations and its agencies for the sake of preserving international peace by controlling population growth. As public health professionals, your task is to improve health across populations by identifying the immediate causes of disease, the combination of causes, and the causes of causes. I'm here to help you do just that, so that as you embark upon the difficult task of eradicating non-communicable diseases, you start at the root of the problem, with the cause of causes. Sustainable Development Goal 3, that will begin implementation in 2016, seeks to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. This goal will neither be accomplished nor will any progress be made in its pursuit without first eliminating the cause of causes of non-communicable diseases that have reached epidemic proportions in the developed and developing world alike, and that now threaten the very survival of the species. The cause of causes you must help me eradicate is the international security prerogative of population control, pursued since its inception in 1945 by adulterating the basic elements of life with chemical and biological toxins to subvert fertility, and by undermining the family structure through psychosocial and economic means to delay the formation of families and keep them small. This is the strategy used to defuse the overpopulation bomb and stabilize populations across the world. Until now, the world's epidemiologists and social scientists have failed to find the cause of causes. I have succeeded. I have succeeded because I placed the people's interests before my own, which is what you must start doing before it is too late and irreparable damage is done to the medical profession and to the institutions of public health, not to mention the human species. Until such time, you are serving an international system and a corrupted medical establishment that harm, not help human health. Let me state clearly and unequivocally that the objective of stabilizing the global population and bringing it down to a sustainable level is non-negotiable. Therefore, what we must do is not challenge population control, which is an absolute necessity and an inescapable reality, but force a change in the methods by which population control has been pursued since 1945. In other words, the chronic, sublethal poisoning of the global populace with endocrine disruptors and other chemical and biological means must stop, while population control must continue. But it must continue by safe contraceptive methods, the only methods being barrier methods and surgical sterilizations, which can only be used if people assume responsibility for population control from governments, so that governments no longer have to poison us into infertility and ill health in secret through the basic elements of life for the sake of safeguarding international peace. For this to happen, you must comprehend that the geopolitical goal of stabilizing the global population is a planetary security prerogative that trumps all other prerogatives, be they national, medical, political, social, cultural, and even religious. And you must relay this knowledge to the general public. For unless the general public comprehends the dire necessity of bringing the global population down to a sustainable level, there can be no transition from covert, coercive, and criminal to overt, voluntary, and ethical methods of population control. You are undoubtedly asking, why is population control a planetary security prerogative? And what is a planetary security prerogative? Due to advances in medicine, sanitation, and nutrition, the population has exploded in the 20th century, and since nearly every child now survives into adulthood, and nearly every adult lives a long life, the population of any given country would double every 20 to 30 years if people were allowed to procreate at will. Since the global population is already at 7.2 billion, in the absence of population control, these 7.2 billion would become 14 billion by 2040, 28 billion by 2070, and 56 billion by the end of the 21st century. This is clearly an unsustainable growth, given that we live on a finite planet. We already use more than 40% of the Earth's ice-free landmass to feed ourselves. There are no new continents to discover and exploit. We have damaged the planet's life support systems and have polluted the soil and the sea. And 2 billion of us live in abject poverty despite our best efforts to share resources across frontiers. Given this undeniable and bitter reality of material limitations, mankind has come to a point in history that gives us no choice and forces us to act now or perish. We have reached a point in our evolution that renders our civilization a force equal to any in nature, but entirely at odds with everything in nature. An unbridled force that disrupts the hard-earned state of equilibrium our planet has held for the past 12,000 years, time during which our species has thrived beyond imagining, at unimaginable cost to all other life forms and to the very elements that make life possible. To survive into the future, we are now forced to erect a global governing structure authorized to wield global governing instruments, capable of maintaining peace among men, of establishing equilibrium between men and nature, and of forging continuity between this and future generations. We must, in other words, consider not only what is good for us here and now, but what is good for future generations, and for all life on Earth, and we must act accordingly. Population control is the most important action required of us here and now if we are to save our civilization, our children, and our planet. Therefore, population control must and will be declared a planetary security prerogative. I am about to give you the key to the vault that unlocks all state secrets, and in so doing I am giving you the antidote to every non-communicable disease. The key is this. The international framework for peace since 1945 is based on population control, which has been accomplished by subverting human fertility through the adulteration of the basic elements of life: food, water, beverages, dental and cosmetic products, with endocrine disruptors that in turn have damaged the entire endocrine system and have indirectly and unintendedly exacerbated the incidence and severity of chronic diseases. Unless you understand how this came to be and why, you will not be able to protect, let alone improve, human health. You will instead fight a losing battle, and you will helplessly watch how human health degrades further and further with each generation, because the damage done to our genetic and intellectual endowment by a concerted and global poisoning program that spans multiple generations is cumulative, and inevitably ends in the termination of the vast majority of our species' genetic lineages. To make you understand the enemy we face, which is neither viral nor bacterial, and neither lifestyle-related nor congenital, I'm about to give you a crash course in geopolitics. Since the end of the Second World War and with the formation of the United Nations in 1945, international peace and stability have been maintained by controlling population growth. Unbeknown to the masses, governments have used covert methods to limit births in developed and underdeveloped countries alike, and to accelerate deaths in Africa and a few critically poor and overpopulated areas elsewhere. Births have been prevented by interfering with the reproductive system so as to lower fertility, while deaths have been promoted by weakening the immune system so as to increase morbidity and mortality. The methods used by every country to control population growth have been dictated by the level of development and the existing infrastructure as much as by political will or lack thereof, and have either been imposed by force and deception from the outside or adopted willingly by the governing, military and scientific elites of nation-states that have relied on the moral, technical and monetary assistance of the United Nations, its agencies, and the greater international community. Regardless of the methods used to control population and whether they are imposed or self-imposed, strict secrecy and deception have been necessary to prevent the masses from discovering the bitter truth that for the past 70 years they have been the object of a silent and global offensive, a campaign of attrition that has turned the basic elements of life into weapons of mass sterility and selective death. Without our knowledge or consent, governments the world over have subverted our reproductive freedom and ability to procreate to achieve ambitious and necessary demographic objectives, and in the process have committed the most odious and wide-sweeping crimes in human history to save mankind from even greater evils: nuclear annihilation, mass starvation, and environmental devastation. The birth of nearly 2 billion children has been prevented, and the death of 500 million adults hurried. While these goals have been intentional, the architects of the global depopulation policy have unintentionally undermined the genetic and intellectual endowment of the human species, and have set back eons of natural selection. Their intentions have never been malevolent, but the unintended results of their actions are frightening. To avoid repeating the massacres of the 2 world wars and the frightening prospect of nuclear annihilation, world leaders agreed at the end of World War II to henceforth uphold peace among nations through mutual cooperation and proactive measures. Recent history had taught nations the hard lesson that war is caused by lack of natural resources when nations outgrow them in their quest for progress and prosperity, and that war can therefore be avoided if nations learn to live within their means by properly managing their natural resources. It was also understood that the only way to avoid outgrowing natural resources is by limiting population growth, this being the only alternative to war. The rationale for controlling population was therefore supplied by the real fear of nuclear conflict and the need to avoid it by living within one's national means. Safeguarding natural resources became the primary national security prerogative of every industrialized nation on earth, and safeguarding peace among nations became the primary imperative of the international community, which was empowered to combat population growth across the world before it leads to wars of necessity. The United Nations was formed to fulfill the task of safeguarding international peace by controlling population growth within nations and facilitating access to raw materials for all nations. The New World Order revolves around the objective of maintaining international peace by controlling population growth and of fostering prosperity by controlling national resources. The requisite shift in thinking in terms of what is good for the world rather than just what is good for a single nation is primarily the accomplishment of the United States. It is a paradigm shift that has propelled the world towards enlightened cooperation, continuous dialogue, and economic interdependence. The United States has promoted this paradigm shift with extraordinary self-restraint and laudable selflessness, considering the potential for abuse and the sacrifices that have been required of it. While the civilian institutional infrastructure was put in place at the United Nations and its agencies to be able to coordinate this colossal global task, the military forces and intelligence agencies of the US, UK, and the Soviet Union, the 3 allied powers that won the war, assumed command and control of the depopulation agenda and pioneered the covert chemical sterilization methods that are still with us today. Despite the ideological conflict waged by the communists